So, hello once again. Welcome to our discussion today. Today, we'll be talking about the histological organization of the female reproductive system. Remember, the last video that we did was on the histological organization of the male reproductive system. So, if you would like to go and maybe revisit it, kindly do so. So, at this point, the objectives for our session today will be talking about the components of the female reproductive system, then talk about the structure and functions of the ovary. So we look at its structure, then also talk about its function. We'll also try to talk about the structure and histological organization of the fallopian tube. We'll also try to look at the organization of the uterus, the parts, and histological organization. Then talk about the cervix, vagina, and the external genitalia. We'll also try to recap on the histological organization of the mammary gland. So for the components, of course, we have two ovaries, two fallopian tubes, or these fallopian tubes are also known as the uterine tubes. And here, the image you can be able to appreciate, you have two ovaries and two fallopian tubes. And in addition to that, you also have a uterus. This is a uterus. And then on the distal aspect of the uterus, you have the cervix opening into the vagina. So those components, ovaries, uterine tubes, uterus, and the vagina, they make up the internal genitalia. Then the external genitalia now, which is majorly known as the vulva, will contain now the mons pubis, the labia majora, the labia minora. All those structures will be external genitalia in females. Yeah, and this image is trying to show us now a better representation of the same. So you can appreciate the ovary here. Then you have the fibula of the fallopian tube. These are uterine tube at this point. We can be able to appreciate the ampulla, the isthmus, and then from there you have the uterus. So the uterus has a fundus, it has a body, and then it has a cervix. The cervix opens into the vagina, which you can be able to appreciate here. Then I would like also us to appreciate how the uterine artery supplies the uterus and also gives some branches to the vagina. And then you have this anastomosis that happens here between the ovarian artery and the uterine artery. Also, it's better to appreciate the mucosal folds of the vagina, the rugae, at this point. Yeah, so that's majorly about this, but let's not not forget about this. We have mesometrium here. You have a mesoovarian here. These are ligaments, and then you have the suspensory ligament of the ovary. So maybe a question: where does suspensory ligament of the ovary come from, and what is its replica in males? So for the ovary, which is what we are going to start with, is that the ovary produces gametes. That is the process of oogenesis. Now, the female sex gametes, so the oocytes, they produce gametes through oogenesis and also produces steroid hormones. So that is estrogen and progesterone. Those are the functions of the ovary. It has a central medulla, so we can appreciate this central medulla. This central medulla contains loose connective tissue, nerves, and blood vessels. So even though the ovarian arteries and ovarian veins will be found there, their branches will be found there. And then it will also have a peripheral cortex. And this peripheral cortex will be containing now the epithelium. This germinal epithelium will also be containing the various ovarian follicles, starting from the primordial follicles, primary follicles, secondary follicles. Then we go to mature follicles. Then from the mature follicles, we have that process of ovulation, where we have the breaching of the germinal epithelium and the tunical virginia. Then we have now the atretic. So this one is an atretic one. Then after this point, after the remains of the corpus, the remains of the Graafian follicle will become corpus luteum. Then I would like us to appreciate the tunical virginia. At this point, this is a tunical virginia of the ovary. Yes, so the surface epithelium is lined by germinal epithelium. So this germinal epithelium is simple cuboidal epithelium. So this epithelium is simple cuboidal epithelium. And then it also have a tunical virginia. So this is the tunical virginia, the one that looks like it's whitish. That's tunical virginia. And then on the outside, you have the germinal epithelium. Okay, so of course, we talked about these follicles being sequential. So from primordial follicles to primary to secondary, and then to mature follicles or the Graafian follicles. And then if ovulation happens, the remains will become the corpus luteum and produces progesterone. And this image shows it well. You can be able to appreciate this is the germinal epithelium, which is simple cuboidal. Below it have the tunical virginia. And then this is just the cortex. So the cortex can be able to appreciate you have the various follicles that are developing. And then maybe from here, we'll start to have the medulla of the ovary. Okay, so at this point, I would like us to appreciate now the various follicles. We start with the primordial follicles. So these primordial follicles, they're ideally the first follicle. So they have just a layer of simple squamous granulosa cells. So in this, you can be able to appreciate, maybe this one can be a good presentation of the simple squamous granulosa cells. Then you go to the primary follicles now, which contain simple cuboidal follicles. So this is a good example of that, and also that this is a good example of primary follicles. So they have simple cuboidal epithelium. And then we go to the other layers, which are now the secondary one. So in secondary one, at this point, there is presence of antrum formation. There's antrum formation. Then remember in the primary follicles, we started the process of stratification. Though it might not be that obvious, but the stratification has started in the primary follicles. In secondary follicles, you start to develop the antrum, the follicular antrum. Then now in mature follicles, you already have a well-developed follicle. You can be able to appreciate the oocytes being present. Then the cells, the various cells. So talk about the corona radiata, the cumulus ophorus, as you can see here. So the corona radiata is present. Then you can be able to see the cumulus ophorus. This is a follicular antrum. Then you have the various thicker cells. So thicker interna, then thicker externa. Not forget that these cells will be our granulosa cells. Yes, so that is, and then in this secondary oocyte, you can be able to appreciate even you have the zona pellucida has already been formed in the mature Graafian follicle. So this one is highly tested in exams. So maybe in your medical school, you might be asked as a thing or maybe to label it. So kindly go through it or maybe have an image of it or draw it in your books. For the next structure that you're going to look at is a fallopian tube. So at this point, I presume you already know that the fallopian tube connects the ovary to the uterus. So they are paired. They are paired structures connecting the uterus to the ovaries. And this is just a cross-section of it. A cross-section of it. So its functions is actually, given that it's connects the ovaries to the uterus, its functions will be majorly to transport the ovum. And then it provides now the environment for fertilization. Remember, fertilization happens in the fallopian tube. And then it also allows the early zygote development. This is gross. It has various segments, the fimbriae, the finger-like projections on the lateral ends. It has the infundibulum, it has the ampulla, then it has the isthmus. But fertilization, most of the time it happens around the ampulla or maybe isthmus of the fallopian tube. So in terms of the layers, of the fallopian tube, it will have three layers. It will have a mucosa, a muscular layer, and then a serosa. So this muscular layer at this point is the intermediate layer. And then mucosa is the innermost layer, serosa is the outermost layer. So maybe we can start from here. So this is a cross section that you have. So this is a mucosa. And this mucosa will be having a simple columnar epithelium. And this simple columnar epithelium, ideally at this point, it will have some cilia. The cells will be ciliated. And then it has no submucosa. You go to muscular component. So this is a muscular component here. These are muscular components, and the muscular component will contain, just like any other round tissue, it will have a thick circular layer and outer longitudinal layer, which are just smooth muscles. So characteristics of smooth muscles will be there, spindle-shaped and other characteristics. Then you go to the serosa. So serosa is the outermost layer. So a layer of simple squamous epithelium, and then below it will have a thin connective tissue. Okay, so in the serosa, you'll have a few blood vessels, as you can see here. So in the connective tissue, the thin connective tissue will have blood vessels, will have nerves at this point. So the vessels will be coming from the uterine arteries and also from the ovarian arteries. So regarding the mucosa, you'll have two cell types. So you'll have these ciliated cells, which are simple columnar. So these are the ciliated cells, which are simple columnar. And ideally, they're found inside the fallopian tube. So their function is to have that ciliary wave directed towards the uterus to enable now the wafting or the movement of the ovum from the fimbriae at this point towards the isthmus. Okay, then the other cell types will be non-ciliated PEG cells. And these PEG cells, they have a very unique function because they produce substances such as fructose, which have a nutritive function to the ovary, to the ovum, sorry, and also to the zygote that has already been formed after fertilization. So these PEG cells have an important function. So despite us having basal cells also, we have also some basal cells. We have some PEG cells. So the PEG cells are in here, as you can see here. So the PEG cells. Then, what are the effects of estrogen and progesterone on the fallopian tube? So estrogen stimulates ciliogenesis, that is now the development of cilia, and also now the movements also are stimulated by estrogen. In addition to that, we'll have progesterone. So progesterone increases the secretory cells, increases these PEG cells that we talked about. Okay, so we've covered the ovary, we've covered the fallopian tube. So right now we are covering the uterus. Of course, we know the uterus is one that houses the developing fetus. So it is highly masculine. Highly masculine. It has three layers, as you can see in this. It has an endometrium, a myometrium, and then a perimetrium. So the uterus grossly will have a body, will have a fundus, and it has a cervix, as we saw in our first slide. And then, as you know, the cervix will project into the vagina. Then, ideally, the uterine wall will be composed of three parts: the endometrium here, then you'll have the myometrium, and then you'll have the perimetrium. This is a perimetrium. So The endometrium, as you all know, it's lined by so as we all know that the endometrium will be lined by simple columnar epithelium, while the perimetrium will be lined by simple squamous epithelium. Then the myometrium is just a muscular component, will be containing a lot of smooth muscles with sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation. So the endometrium is lined by simple columnar epithelium that invaginates into the lumen. So ideally now, if it's invaginating into the lumen, that means the lamina propria will be having some uterine glands to secrete the secretions into the lumen. And then this is important. The endometrium consists of two layers, the stratum basale and stratum functionalis. So the stratum functionale or stratum functionalis now is all that gets sloughed off during menstruation. Then stratum basale remains. Yeah, so at this point, I would also like to remind us of the various defects in terms of penetration of the placenta, in terms of its implantation. So remember, you can have placenta accreta, increta, and pacreta. So what are the various levels of penetration according to the layers histologically of the uterus? To the right, I would like to ask to appreciate the various, how now the uterine artery divides. So you'll have the uterine artery, it will divide into various, it will divide into arcuate arteries. Then these arcuate arteries will give you the radial branches. The radial branches will give you straight arteries, which do not penetrate into the stratum functionally. So remember at this point we are at, this is the myometrium. Then given that you can see uterine gland here, this is the endometrium. So the straight arteries are just found in the stratum basale. Then the spiral arteries are found even into the stratum functionalis. So stratum functionalis will contain the spiral arteries, and then the spiral arteries, they go and form blood lacunae with the veins. Yeah, so it's important that you realize that. And then you can also see the lumen of the uterine glands open into the lumen of the uterus now. Okay, so the endometrium undergoes proliferative, secretory phase, and menstrual phase. So these are the three phases that the endometrium undergoes. So proliferative will have with the proliferation of stratum functionalis. Secretory, production of various structures, various things by the uterine glands in preparation. Even the hormones increase at this point. And then menstrual phase, if failure of implantation happens, the menstrual phase happens. So in the menstrual phase is when now ischemia of the stratum functionalis happens, and then that's the reason why you have the sloughing off of the stratum functionalis. Then if implantation happens, then that means the endometrium undergoes proliferation. Undergoes proliferation just to try and protect the implanting zygote. So let's talk about after fertilization, after implantation, what happens? We'll have a placenta. So this is a placenta. So as you can see, this is the myometrium. This is a myometrium. Then this is a placenta. So the placenta is formed by two bits. But before then, it's better we appreciate that the placenta allows the exchange of gases and metabolites between maternal and the fetal circulation. So it's that is enabling now the exchange between maternal and fetal circulations. So the exchange of gases and metabolites and even nutrition happens of nutrients happens at the placenta. So it consists of two parts, a fetal chorion. So this is a fetal chorion. This is the fetal chorion. And then it has a maternal portion, which is now the basal plates or the decidua basalis. So that's the fetal part. So the fetal and maternal blood is separated. Ideally, they do not mix. It's separated by the placental barrier, which develops in the tertiary chorionic villi. So here, you can appreciate the first layer that you have here. These are chorionic plates. Then this chorionic plate now will have the various layers. Then you can appreciate the blood vessels. So these blood vessels will have now the villi projecting into these blood lacunae that are present. Yes, and then you can see now the exchange is happening. So the projections of this chorion, now the fetal part, will be containing the syncytiotrophoblasts, cytotrophoblast, the mesenchymal connective tissue, and the fetal blood vessels. So this is some part of the placental barrier. And then maybe to wrap it up is that the villi, so this villi, they'll be found in this blood lacunae or the blood vascular spaces in the placenta. So through that now, it's allowing the exchange to happen. And then this placenta, its function majorly, apart from nutrition, is that it produces steroids, hormones majorly now progesterone, and then also, remember progesterone is the one that maintains pregnancy, then also protein hormones such as HCG, it is human chorionic gonadotropin, and then you have human chorionic somatotropin, then you have relaxin and leptin. So those hormones are important in terms of development of the fetus and even markers of pregnancy. So we go to the cervix. So remember, we've already covered the uterus, the placenta, now we're going to the cervix. So for the cervix, a very important structure because it's all that projects, portion of the uterus that projects into the vagina. So at this point, this is the lumen of the uterus. So at this point, we have the endocervix, then is the ectocervix. So the cervix has two parts, an endocervix and an ectocervix. So it's important that we know that the endocervix, let me start with the endocervix. The endocervix will be containing simple columnar epithelium. So this simple columnar epithelium is the same epithelium that was there in the uterus. And then the ectocervix, which is here, will be lined by simple squamous, non-keratinized epithelium. And then the junction here, this junction here, so you can see there is the junction that is coming up across. So the junction is here actually. So that junction is one that is known as the transformation zone. And this transformation zone is one that is affected much by the various dysplasias, by the various squamous dysplasias, various carcinomas of the cervix. Yeah, so that transformation zone is important. So remember, at this point, you'll be transforming from simple columnar epithelium to stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Yeah, so remember, this stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium is the same epithelium that is found in the vagina. Yeah, so here we can be able to appreciate the Nabothian cysts. So these Nabothian cysts, they're just glands, cervical glands that have been occluded by the mucoid plugs that are usually produced by the cervix. And then you can see the cervical glands that produce mucus to enable now the closure of the cervix. So the ectocervix is here, this is the endocervix. And then this is a cervical os. So this image at this point is just trying to show us the simple squamous, the stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium that is present on the ectocervix. Okay, so let's talk about now the vagina and the external genitalia. So I did the vagina, we talked about it having simple stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Then the external genitalia, at this point, we're talking about the vulva. So the vulva will be comprising of the mons pubis, the labia majora, the labia minora, and even talk about the Bartholin glands that will be there. So that is external genitalia. So this image that we are seeing here is actually an image of the labia majora. So we can be able to appreciate the epithelium that is present, the simple stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. But before then, let's just appreciate that the vagina extends from the cervix up to the vestibule. Then it is lined by stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium and lacks glands. This vagina, it lacks glands. Though it has rugae, it has mucosal folds. Then this stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium will also be present in the whole of external genitalia. Then it has an intermediate muscular bit and then also an adventitia. So the female external genitalia, the vulva now will be consisting of the mons pubis, the labia majora, the labia minora, the clitoris, and the vestibule. So at this point now, you can be able to appreciate these are actually sebaceous glands. You can be able to appreciate sebaceous glands, then you can be able to appreciate the duct. It's here. Then how the secretions come out into this external genitalia. So this is a lumen now. This is a lumen of the vestibule, and then this is now, you can appreciate how this epithelium, certified squamous keratinized epithelium, actually it's keratinized at this point. It's keratinized, given that this is labia majora. This is labia majora. So at this point, this epithelium will be keratinized. But in vagina, it's non-keratinized. And it also lacks glands. But you can appreciate in the labia majora, it has stratified squamous keratinized epithelium, the presence of sebaceous glands. Then we finalize it by talking about the mammary glands. So the mammary glands, we know it's gross organization. It has a nipple, the areolar tissue surrounding it is a skin, it has adipose tissue, then you can be able to appreciate the parenchyma and the ducts that are present. Then these lactiferous sinuses before you open into the lactiferous ducts. So the mammary gland embryologically develops from the mammary ridges in the embryo. Maybe a point to remind us that if you like to talk about the development of the skin and the appendages such as the mammary glands, you can go and watch our video on the development of the skin and the mammary glands. That has anomalies, has very good, nice steps. So kindly go and watch that video. Then, so ideally the mammary regions will be present in the embryo, and then you'll have like the mammary region will, ideally some of it will obliterate, except the thoracic region. So what happens now during puberty is that due to hormonal influence, the breast will further develop. The breast will further develop, and it will develop now the tubuloalveolar glands, now the parenchymal aspect of the mammary gland. So the mammary glands, remember, they are modified tubuloalveolar glands. Actually, remember how we talked about, when you're talking about the development of the mammary gland, we talk about it as a modified sweat gland, as a modified sweat gland, as a modified apocrine sweat gland. So this mammary gland is tubuloalveolar. It will consist of a terminal duct lobular unit. So this terminal duct lobular unit is important physiologically, anatomically, and pathologically. Yeah, so this is a terminal duct lobular unit comprising of intralobular stroma. Then you can see the terminal acini, and then this terminal duct here. Then terminal duct open to the lactiferous duct. So Maybe you can appreciate this here. This is a cut cross section. Histologically, what will you be able to see? You'll be able to see the acini, of which they're lined by simple cuboidal epithelium, and then surrounded by epithelial cells. That's a stromal tissue now. And then these ducts open into lactiferous duct, as you can see here. Yeah, so that is it regarding the mammary gland in terms of this terminal duct lobular unit. So each terminal duct lobular unit is connected to collecting duct systems, which form the lactiferous ducts that open into the nipple. Then these terminal ducts lobular unit of the mammary gland represent now the cluster of small secretory alveoli that are actually inactive in lactating glands, and then the terminal ductules in inactive glands now at this point, which are now acted upon by the various hormones. So talk about progesterone and estrogen. Yes, so ideally, this intralobular stroma and the interlobar stroma, they should be sensitive to the hormones. Yes, they should be sensitive to the hormones so that they actually proliferate during puberty, and then they also enable the terminal acini to even secretory portion or to even proliferate also and increase in number. And histologically, this is what you're supposed to appreciate regarding now the parenchymal aspect of the mammary glands. You're supposed to appreciate the simple cuboidal epithelium. Here, this is a lumen with the milk secretions here. Can be able to appreciate simple cuboidal epithelium. And then you have these myoepithelial cells. So the myoepithelial cells, they have a contractile function. So once they contract, they enable the production of the structures. So that's it regarding the mammary gland. And I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. So see you in our next video. In case of any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. Thank you.